sticking around until this long. I realize this is like one of the last talks of the entire conference, and you're probably all very tired from traveling and all of that. So with that, let's get right into it. So the group I'm going to talk about today is within the Astereae. If you've driven here from a few hundred miles away, you probably see all these yellow bushes on the side of the road. Or as we've been collecting them, is that one different? Because they're all just yellow bushes. To us, we're driving 70 or 80 down the interstate. It's the second largest tribe in the world, and there's tons of diversity in North America that's been previously unresolved. So just sort of where it goes. So if you see these are Euthamia that are relatively closely related to Euthamias. We have ones that grow right next to parking lots for convenience, and ones that grow at 10,000 feet elevation. So I had someone almost hold my feet while I went over to take a picture of one over the cliff. We of course have our Solidago subtribe in the strict sense, so we have tons of goldenrods distributed throughout eastern, western North America. We have lots of these little high elevation taxa, and tons of course that grow either on roadsides or in very specific habitats, often speciating from very low to very high elevation and going against different precipitation gradients. We have our actual group with Euthamia in it. So the top parts, these grow usually in relatively moist or wet areas in eastern North America. We also have these very dry, little tiny subshrubs with yellow flowers on them that look just like everything else along the roads here. We have the actually pretty group. Yes, I know. The Asteraceae Symphyotrichini here, very pretty, again, all throughout North America. We have this one, which is actually pretty diverse. This includes things like Grindelia, which has been responsible for single-handedly destroying more notebooks than any other plant I've collected. We have Chrysopsidini, and we have the cutest little comp I have ever seen. This is Moniptilin bellioides, and the whole plant is maybe 1 centimeter at maturity when it flowers out in California. And then, of course, we have all of these erigerons. So out east we have a few of them, but there's tons of different ones here, again, going from low to high elevation. And then we have in East North America, sort of our sister group to the rest of the North American Astereae, this Dolingaria Eucephalus. And I believe we have a talk about Eucephalus in a bit after this. So this is where we are within the North American group of the tribe Astereae, the Euthamia. And so Euthamia, they look a lot like goldenrods or just regular Solidago. They used to be in the same genus, but they've gotten split up. As you can see here, they grow in only the highest quality habitats available, such as bursting out through concrete in abandoned parking lots or on the side of golf carts. So there has been really substantial disagreements taxonomically and subsequently biogeographically about these organisms. They essentially all are suffrutescent perennials. All the leaves are simple. They range from glabrous to pubescent, varying degrees, usually just a little bit. They're all about the same size. There's incredibly small variation between species. So I've had to look at like hundreds of specimens to parse out what actually is what and why these things are different. And by far the biggest offender of this is something called Euthamia graminifolia. It's distributed usually throughout northern, northeastern U.S. There's places in like North Dakota and stuff you can find it too in Canada. But there's questions about whether these things in the southeast Gulf Coast and the Atlantic Coast are also it. Again, only the highest quality habitats these grow in. Lowell and I collected this off of an interstate in Louisiana, where we went through basically like 4 feet of water to go get these while there were cars zooming by. There's also one on the Atlantic coast called Euthamia hirtipes, and both these have been questioned substantially taxonomically. So some people thought all of this stuff occurring throughout the coast of eastern North America has been the same taxon. Others say it's some variety or it's a subspecies of graminifolia that occurs in different habitats, so it looks a little bit different. Other people think that, okay, well maybe this stuff down here, maybe that's graminifolia, but then this thing's a different species. Or, one of the more interesting hypotheses, that it's a hybrid between these two species. This strictly coastal one in eastern North America with super, super thin little leaves, and then a relatively broad one throughout the northern parts of the US. And it makes sense a little bit if you look at it, because both of these species overlap in Virginia and a little bit of North Carolina, where this coastal entity sort of has northern extent. But molecular data show that these three are actually very different organisms phylogenetically. We get this graminifolia up in the northern US and most of southern Canada that groups actually with its strictly coastal, very, very thin-leaved taxon. We have this Atlantic coast species that has a very distinct genetic signature from the rest of the species in this genus. And then we see oddly that the southeast Gulf Coast taxon, scabra here, noted for its scabrous hairs, throughout little stubble and then that one actually groups with sort of a Great Plains or western Midwest, relatively high quality prairie species throughout the middle of the US and a bit of Canada. Now, so we see that neither the Atlantic ghost or the southeast Gulf Coast taxons, they're not really polymorphic, but weirdly, and this kind of makes sense why they've been confused, at the zone where they sort of intermingle down in the Florida Panhandle, the Apalachicola River area, there's actually hybrids that pop up here in sequences when you look at nuclear ribosomal data. They indicate that biogeographically makes sense. They hybridize in this specific area where they both meet. So we said, okay, well these are distinct groups, but what are the actual features? How do you tell things apart besides they grow here or they grow there? So pubescence is one of the few characters we can use to distinguish these species. So in the northern species, they can be incredibly hairy throughout all of the stems, on the peduncles, or on the very, very, very small peduncles of the heads, on the leaves all over, but they can also be entirely glabrous, not a single hair on their body. The southeast Gulf Coast taxon, the scabra one, has short little stubby hairs throughout the plant, usually irregularly interspersed, and the one at the Atlantic coast is often entirely glabrous. Occasionally has a few sort of longer thin hairs, but often is completely without. Resin pits are really prominent in this genus, as they are with most North American Astereae. If you ever walk by one of these rabbit bush sprints, you can immediately smell and detect what you just walked past, because they have incredibly concentrated resin pits on their leaves. So for this, we see the Atlantic coast one has tons of resin pits. The one in the southeast Gulf Coast has some, but then the graminifolia in the northern US has basically none of them on their leaves. What about reproductive features? They're a little hard to measure because these capitula are maybe a few centimeters tall at most. They're very small, like a lot of solidagos or rabbit bushes throughout North America. We see essentially, graminifolia has the most flowers per head, ranging from like high teens to even low 40s. Well, these two have teens, 20s maybe. But then this one, unlike the others, it has this relatively enormous peduncle at maybe a centimeter long, whereas the other two are essentially sessile or subsessile. We can model these things by geography, see where they end up, what niche they actually occupy in the region that we can find them at. We find that for the northern species, it has a sort of coastal distribution up in the far northern US, but it's also sort of throughout the Midwest in general. It relies largely on having a decent winter condition. It has to be in eastern North America. There's a fair amount of precipitation to it, and there's a couple soil factors that help determine where it can and can't occur. For the one in the southeast Gulf Coast, this scabra, it's very specific to this relatively limited range, not really crossing the Apalachicola River much. It relies on having quite a lot of coarse fragments in its soil, which is in contrast to the much more broadly distributed Euthamia hirtipes on the Atlantic coast, which goes from essentially New York, Delaware, that region, down to, again, about the Apalachicola, which serves as a natural biological barrier for a lot of species that exist in that region. And you can see here, this little magenta oval, this ellipse here, is where these two species can hybridize a bit, and it's sort of where they co-occur, which is a phenomenon you see at least in one of their Euthamia species that occurs up near the Great Lakes. So for what we want to do after this, so a lot of it is about improving the modeling, trying to get an idea of where these things actually occur. We have a 1 kilometer resolution currently. We can scale it down to about 90 meters square, about 30 meters square, to get a more precise idea of what specific sort of local climatic variables are driving these. We can also model into the past and the future. Partially for the southeast Gulf Coast taxon, the scabra, because its distribution is very limited, and we want to know if climate change is going to significantly reduce that and make it a possible risk for extirpation. And then modeling into the past to see how these distributions have changed throughout time, see if they speciated when they began to become allopatric, if it was more sympatric, local environmental change that was driving their distribution patterns, and also modeling with a lot more genera. In the North American Astereae, modeling is actually quite quick using this program, or using this toolbox in ArcGIS or ArcMap. It takes maybe about 4 to 5 minutes an hour to model each plant, and the longest part's honestly just getting coordinates. We can do this with a lot of other really cool genera, especially in the West. We have things like these rabbit bushes, like these Erica mares, a lot of those other groups I showed at the start. You can model and see sort of this repeated pattern of going from going to low to high elevation and speciation rates changing within those different groups. And so with that, sorry if I talked a little bit fast. Tons of people to thank for this. Of course, my home institution, as well as Dr. Urbatsch's institution with the great Shirley C. Tucker Herbarium at LSU. We relied on a lot of herbarium samples and collections, including some that I made. There are numerous institutions and universities that let us sample a lot of historic populations for some taxa which weren't particularly common in many regions. Without herbaria and natural history collections, this project, like many other systematics projects, couldn't continue. And so we're in great debt. We're in great debt continuation of institutions for important research, not just with this, but with all biological groups. And so with that, it's a little bit short, but I will now accept short stories disguised as questions if anyone has any.